Welcome to W Report. This is an analytical transformation of an interview. What are the key takeaways from the Alaska meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? Was it a genuine return to diplomacy or just optics under media pressure to be tough on Russia? And what does it mean for Europe and the war in Ukraine?
Well, if we had this discussion 24 hours ago, I would be at a loss to say something that my peers have not already said, because everybody had a microphone in front of them in the minutes following the closing of the conversation. But since we are speaking today, there are a lot of fresh news has come in, which I hope we can go through, because it answers the question that immediately came up following the press briefings. So I think it was 12 minutes, 15 minutes. It was very short. That took place immediately following the summit talks in Anchorage. The question that arose was, what did the Russians and the Americans agree on? Because Mr. Putin said, yes, we've come closer to solving questions, to solving the problem. Well, how did they come closer? There was no information given out by either party in the minutes following the summit. And all of that has come out both by intent and by a subversive release to the press by people, I'm sure, like Macron. He couldn't possibly resist the temptation to call reporters in to show how much he knew that was of interest to them. What I'm saying is that the basic agreements that Trump and Putin made have come out in the last 24 hours. The first shoe to drop was soon afterwards, and the most important information only came out, I would guess, in the middle of the night or early this morning. The last very important information, I read it extensively reported in the Financial Times, their online edition to this morning, talking about the territorial issue. Specifically saying that Putin had proposed that Russia would receive or should receive all of the territory of Donbas, that is, of the two oblasts of Donetsk and Lugansk, and that it would compromise on the other two oblasts, which form the new Russia, and these are Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. In those last two oblasts or regions, Russia would agree to a freeze at the line of confrontation. In the first two, that strictly speaking Donbas of Donetsk and Lugansk, it would insist that Ukraine withdraw completely from those territories, so that Russia would receive now territory that it had not conquered. Now, our lying press has said, yes, the Russians only hold about 50% of the territory they're now demanding be turned over. First of all, out of the two oblasts, the Russians have 98%, maybe 99% of Lugansk. Lugansk was the easiest for them to recapture from the very first days of the special military operation. That was the case. And with respect to Donetsk, before this summer offensive got underway, the Russians had about 50% of that. Now they have 70%. So from the get-go, what our CNN and BBC are telling us is fabricated. The concession is one of time and lives, because it is apparent to anybody with the military knowledge that the Russians will take the whole of Donbas in a matter of weeks. The story coming out of Kyiv is that by giving up Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, these are fortified towns between the present line of confrontation around Pokrovsk to the east and the Dnieper River. Ukraine would be giving up its ability to resist a further Russian onslaught across the Dnieper into into West Ukraine. Well, this is the same lies and fabrication that have been behind the Ukrainian story, which was repeated endlessly by the United States and the European allies over the last 3 years. I think most of us who have our brains screwed in right understand that Russia would never willingly take any Ukrainian territory in West Ukraine, because that would be really an occupation and not a governance, and they would expect a lot of difficulty ruling that area. So the whole story of what the Russians want is now clear. The other smaller issue, which came out, which is the first shoe to drop, which I didn't mention a moment ago, was that that Mr. Trump announced he had switched his view, that essentially is aligned with Vladimir Putin on what sort of an agreement is now on before us. He had previously been aligned with the Europeans and with Kyiv, saying we must have immediate unconditional ceasefire. And that was about to be imposed on Russia. This summit was supposed to end in the signing off by Putin of such a ceasefire and so forth. What we have now is Trump aligned with Putin and saying that that is senseless, that is only provisional, it can be reversed, and what we need is a genuine peace treaty. The difference is very great. The Ukrainians are doing their best to confuse the general public about what the difference is, and to suggest that a genuine peace is only setting the stage for further Russian offensive against them. The Europeans are trying to rope in Trump to the notion that when we have this peace signed, then we need to have peacekeepers to enforce the peace. These are absolute propaganda and lies. Then the point of Mr. Putin is we have to resolve the underlying issues behind this war, and we have to remove the issues that separate us and have caused conflict. And if you have that enshrined in a peace treaty, there's no need for peacekeepers, because there's no conflict to break out again. So this is where we are today, with Europe digging in their heels, finding any logic, however impossible and possibly irrational it is, like what I just described, that a peace treaty is only setting the stage for the next war. Well, this is a very interesting interpretation of what peace treaties are about. I guess when you have peace treaties that are disastrous, like Versailles, that's true. But if you have peace treaties designed by people of intelligence and compromise and diplomacy and goodwill, then a peace treaty is a peace treaty. And you don't have to confuse it with a truce. So this has happened in the last 24 hours, and it is illuminating. If I can just go one step further, I don't want to do this to be a lengthy talk here, at a lecture. I want to say that we really, Glenn, we're living in the dark ages. It's very sad to say, but I listened to your interview yesterday with the minister, the member of parliament, the German former UN official, talking about lack of respect, lack of diplomacy. Let me just change the term for this. We're living in the dark ages. This is a period of hate, a period of vile propaganda, a period of impunity, and where those who have committed crimes, including high crimes and treason, walk away without ever being brought to court, and with no fear that their crimes will be fully exposed and that they will pay for them. This is where we are today, and it is terrible. And I take it back in the United States to Mr. Obama, who never did anything about those guilty for the invasion of Iraq. So they all were sitting. Mr. Cheney was out there. Oh yes, my last comment is on the first response of the British press and also some of the U.S. press. How do they respond to the warmth and cordiality of Mr. Trump's reception of Putin? Well, either that Mr. Trump is being played by Putin, which is peculiar since they haven't even met. The warmth and cordiality preceded the talks. As what do? They remind us, hey, they're meeting in Alaska because there are not too many places where Mr. Putin and Trump can meet because, hey, remember that? Mr. Putin is an international, he's a war criminal. And he has been condemned by the International Court of Justice. Well, they pulled that one out of the hat, in case any of us forgot that complete miscarriage of justice over the supposed kidnapping of thousands, or maybe it was several dozen Ukrainian children who were in the middle of the war zone without parents or custodians. Anyway, that's my more lengthy introduction to where we are today.
Doctorow argues that the meeting's outcome is a shift from ceasefire at any cost to a peace treaty. Moscow demands formalizing full control over Luhansk and Donetsk, freezing the line in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, and doing without peacekeepers. In his view, Trump has accepted that treaty logic, while resistance from Kyiv and Europe reflects a propaganda-driven fear of compromise. How do you see the shift from ceasefire talks to addressing the root causes of the conflict? Does this signal a return to U.S.-Russia bilateral diplomacy, sidelining Europe in the process?
Well, I'll get to that in one moment, but I want to go back to the hate issue and to the issue of respect or lack of respect that you touched upon. Some time ago, when I was in regular correspondence with Professor Stephen Cohen, he insisted to me when I was about to write something regarding George Soros's visit to Brussels and his inability to remember anything on stage. I was about to mention the senility in my article, and he cautioned me. This was 10 years ago, and the man is still alive. He cautioned me that ad hominem argumentation is really unacceptable in academic discourse. I disagreed, and I continue to disagree. Russians, as you probably noticed since you spent good time there, they don't believe in phrenology anymore. They don't take the shape of somebody's skull as meaning very much. I mean, the top part, for example, or the back part, where there's but they do take physiognomy very seriously. They take facial expression very seriously. And Americans pretend it doesn't exist. Anybody who was following Dick Cheney must have understood the man was mentally ill just by his crooked smile. But you couldn't really speak about it because that's an ad hominem remark. I mean, but his smile, it's not like his nose or his ears. The smile is something you make, and it tells you something about what's behind the face. Mogherini, she became mentally ill in service. You could see in her face the tension, and she lost concentration. She wasn't up to the job. All right. I've made my point that, what can you say about the descent of political culture in the West? We know about the United States descent. It never rose very high, with a few exceptions. But even from that medium bar, it's descended since the 1990s. In Europe, it's collapse, an intellectual collapse. When I was growing up in the States, I'd have people say, the British, they speak so well. They always have really upper crust people running the government. You can't say that now. They've had a succession of idiots. which they themselves, which the city of London called out when they threw out, it was a truss, I forget who lasted like 6 weeks, what lasted less time than iceberg lettuce. Because she was intellectually incompetent. What can you say about Callas? She's a laughing stock of Russia. What can you say about Annalena Baerbock? That Germany would have in its cabinet a moron like that, I mean, she's a moron, is unthinkable. And so how can you look for respect, diplomacy, and the rest of it for people who are savages, uneducated, no knowledge of anything, people who speak about a 360-degree change of opinion? This is beneath contempt. I think we have to look at the democratic processes that are putting these morons in power before we can start saying, well, they see this or they don't see that. This has to be re-examined. Here in Belgium, we have very good political scientists who spend a lot of time talking about electoral processes, because we had this crazy situation of two nations under one roof, the Flemings and the Francophones. And so they try to find very inventive, progressive solutions to these problems. That kind of creativity has to be used more within Europe to find solutions to bring out competent people to the fore. They are not there. And under those circumstances, you have the crazy reaction to yesterday's summit that we see on the front pages of the European newspapers. They simply are not up to the challenge. I think you have addressed in some of your recent programs this question about Europe becoming geopolitically irrelevant. Well, because of the low level of political culture in present-day Europe. There are no great people. There's some brave people like Orban and Fico, but there are no great people. I don't mean to say that great people are always wise people or likable people, but their intellectual capacities, their ability to look at big picture issues, it's not here today. So I'm sorry, now that I've gone off on this tangent, but I've lost the line of your question. Could you just remind me?
How do you interpret Trump's shifting rhetoric? Is it a balancing act between Europe's hardline stance and Russia's demands? Or are the United States simply offloading the burden of containing Moscow onto their allies?
Well, this would have been certainly a good interpretation before Mr. Trump and his associates gutted the CIA, gutted the National Foundation for Democracy, before they took all the bad guys that they could find out of the federal government. I don't know who is continuing this type of intervention, neocon intervention. Maybe it's just the Soros Foundation or similar organizations. Certainly the Brits are deep in this, probably much more responsible for any of these nefarious developments than the Americans are. The problem with Trump, and which puts me in an awkward position, is the sharp contrast between what he's doing as a peacemaker in Ukraine and what he's doing as an enabler of genocide in Gaza. When I listened to, I think it was Politico, was being interviewed this morning on the BBC about Mr. Trump as a peacemaker and how it pains him to hear about people being killed in war. What can I say? That is not the Trump that I am an apologist for, so to speak. I am in favor of what he's doing in Ukraine. I believe it is well planned, that he has very able assistants in Steve Witkoff to keep him in line, to keep his thinking solid. But of course, he is working with the same Witkoff, doing this very, very nasty cooperation with Netanyahu's government in genocide. So it's a mixed picture, a very mixed picture. But to think that he shifts from day to day, no, I can't abide that. There is clearly a very heavy commitment of that man to find a peace in Ukraine, not because he loves peace and is worried about people being killed, but because of much bigger things, how he wants to reshape the global geopolitics. And yes, of course, you're right. The idea of separating Russia from China is an idée fixe of many people in his circle, starting with Rubio, his Secretary of State. So that is certainly guiding his attention to Russia and his attempts to deal diplomatically and cordially with Mr. Putin.
Has Russia fully turned away from the idea of Greater Europe in favor of Asia? Or is there still a chance to reintegrate it into a European security system?
Let's not speak about Europe. Let's speak about who runs Europe. Who runs Europe is Germany. And the responsibility for this lost opportunity put directly at the door along with America in 2008. You have mentioned the Medvedev initiative. I followed that very closely when it was made. It was very badly prepared by the Russians. Mr. Lavrov made an attempt to revive that after it was cursorily dismissed by Merkel, to breathe some life into it, because the text that Medvedev released, and I think he released it on social media, he was trying to be very, very, very with it, very up to date. America still had public diplomacy as a flag they were flying, and he used that. Anyway, it was badly done. Nonetheless, she dismissed it out of hand. We have security done. It's called NATO. Don't bother us. And that was a disastrous, lost opportunity, because Mr. Medvedev, say he was the stand-in for Putin, but he was the president. And he didn't have stand-in here across his chest. He could do something and sign something and negotiate something. And everyone said, "Oh, Merkel, she speaks Russian. She gets on with them. She is the intercessor with the Russians," and so on. She hated the Russians from her childhood, obviously, and she was dismissive of them in the most crude way. When in 2012 she ended all talk about visa-free travel, saying we're not going to let those crooks into our country, as if every Russian was an oligarch, and those thieving oligarchs all got into the country anyway, but normal citizens were not able to. She was the point of departure for where we are today. I say that because she had control of the appointment of the president of the commission. Juncker was put in at her suggestion because he was manageable in the usual sense. That's to say, they had the goods on him. So he was under her control. The Parliament, the European Parliament, was under her control effectively, because the European People's Party, even back then, and certainly in 2015, had complete control of the European Parliament. And she missed the opportunity. Why? It wasn't an accident. Because Germany had done a switch. Germany was no longer interested in the East. Germany was interested in Mitteleuropa. Germany had found very good colonies in Poland and the Czech Republic for very cheap labor to facilitate its export industry of manufactured goods. They never put in to particularly in Poland, complete cycle production. They put in bits and parts production. So that the Poles had nothing, the Germans had everything. They had all the profit coming from the exports. And given that the economic interests of Germany, the number of Germans employed, thanks to Mitteleuropa, no doubt many times exceeded the 400,000 Germans in 2015 who were said to owe their jobs to the Russian trade, Germany economically decided, the Mittelstand decided that the Mitteleuropa, friends within the former Soviet bloc, were more valuable to them than good relations with Russia. And it so happens that those countries, Poland and the Baltics, hey, they're Russian-hating, and Germany joined the Russian-hating gang. So, say we can talk about Europe's mistakes, but I think we're missing the point. We're missing the point today, considering where Mr. Merz is. He didn't come from nowhere. He's a direct line of this German turn against Russia. He's an aggravated case. He's an ugly case, but it's the same line that you can find in 2008 and still better in 2014 with the Minsk Accords, to which she was a party. She was anti-Russian, and Germany controlled the European institutions.
So the Alaska summit wasn't just optics. It was a turning point. Trump abandoned the ceasefire at any cost line and embraced Russia's logic of a full peace deal. Moscow wants legal control over Donbas and a frozen front in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. Europe is panicking. U.S.-Russia bilateral diplomacy is back. This wasn't just a talk. It was an attempt to rewrite the rules. Thanks for watching. Support the channel if you find this format valuable. More deep dives are coming soon. Until then, think for yourself and draw your own conclusions.